Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of PR Explored. It's a video podcast where we delve into trends and topics related to public relations. I'm Michelle Garrett. I'm your host, and I'm a PR consultant and writer. And today I'd like to welcome my guest, Bo Breuklander of Breuklander Communications. Hi, Bo.
Hey, Michelle, great to be here.
Thanks for being here today. You and I have known each other for a few years and have collaborated a little bit on articles and things over the years. And so I've always been a big fan of your work. And you are my go to person on this topic. We're talking about ESG today, and we'll be talking specifically about AI and ESG. And we'll be diving into all that. But first, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you've been up to, and I'll share some links.
Yeah, thank you so much. So, hey, everyone. As Michelle mentioned, I'm Bo Breuklander. I am principal and founder of Breuklander Communications. I've been doing that for a little over a year now. I'm also an adjunct instructor in the communications department at University of Tampa. So I am based here in Tampa, but I'm originally from Oklahoma. Also here in Tampa, I support member operations for Embark Collective, which is an incredible premier startup community in Florida. So I urge you to check it out if you're interested. But yeah, that's kind of what I've been up to. I've been diving into all things AI, trying to figure out how I teach that to students at University of Tampa. And then that kind of lends itself to the conversation we'll have today and how that impacts our profession.
Yes, and we know that, of course, AI is having an impact on everything we're doing, and ESG is it's no stranger to that. Do we want to kind of talk a little bit about just kind of maybe setting the stage a little bit about, um, you know, how ESG, DEI, all of it kind of fits together? And I want to make sure we define the terms because, again, I think we throw them around a lot, as you and I were discussing before we got on air today.
Mhm.
And ESG is defined as environmental, social, and governance. And then we can talk a little bit about just kind of give us, you know, a little primer on how this all fits together, if you would.
Yeah, well, I mean, as far as our roles in relating to our publics, right? The audiences we serve, it's within the company, it's outside the company, it's investors, stakeholders, customers, potential customers, and everybody in between, right? Depending on your organization, you could have a wider reach than others, but really, what ESG, as you've defined, what that represents is, and hopefully it some way ties back to your values and your reason for being a company. So not just making a profit, not just impacting the bottom line, but making an impact on your people, the people you serve, your people, your employees as well, and your communities, whether that's, a local community, if you're a global company that's in all the different areas that you serve and that you do business with, and also for future generations. So the idea is that you're doing good, right? To put it simply, you're doing good. You're doing right by people. And again, everything really boils back to people. And I think that's going to be a theme, especially as we talk to technology and future regulations, things that might be coming fairly quickly. It all goes back to people, right? Political wins can shift, but people are still people. Your stakeholders are still your stakeholders, and that will always be the case.
That's right. And I think, we can't please all of the people all of the time, as we know. And so I think we have to adopt the principles that work for the business and kind of try to stick with those. I mean, as much as we can, while also, adapting to changes and things. But I mean, you can't be, changing gears all the time. I think it's important when you stand for something. I mean, what do you think about that? Like,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Because what it shows is consistency and trust. I mean, we're trying to build trust among our communities, and that's what this is, right? So
right.
if your stakeholders, if you know your stakeholders well, which is if we're doing our jobs correctly as communicators, then you are that conduit, right? You're not just a mouthpiece for the organization. You're not just a megaphone. You're actually providing feedback and leadership within the organization to your C-suite, to your teams. This is what we're seeing. This is what we're feeling. Our stakeholders are feeling pressures here. This is how we can help. It really solidifies the reason, Dietrich, your reason for being in business, right? Being so close to startups and the startup ecosystem here in Tampa has kind of shown me, like, even though a company might be big, and no matter what your industry is, you still have, like, you go back to the organization's founding, like, it started for a reason. Yeah, you want to build a business, you want to make money, but there's a reason. It's solving a problem for people, and as competitive and as connected as everybody has become these days, it's so important to, like you said, be consistent. Like, your purpose has momentum, and
Right.
you need to carry that momentum forward in one direction and remain purposeful, right? And so if you have strong corporate ESG or social responsibility values, stick with those, right? Yeah, you can't make everybody happy. You're gonna face some heat, but in the grand scheme of things, you should be able to survive that. And we could talk about resiliency, and maybe that's another conversation, but I do believe that your purpose, the strength in your purpose, and the strength around your ESG values is is vital to that momentum.
Yes. Yes, and I think obviously your audiences are paying attention, and, they know when companies stray from what when they don't walk their talk, I guess. They can pick up on that, and then that can be detrimental to your brand, as well. So I think that's just important for people to understand, is that, if you're gonna shift gears, then, you may end up paying a price, and, you wanna make sure that you're, kinda staying true to what you've put forward, and, um, I don't know I think it's harder than ever, but yet it's more important than ever, because we look at the trust barometer every year, the Edelman Trust Barometer. Of course, people trust companies more than they trust the media or government organizations, but it's the trust still isn't super high, even for companies. I think on that meet, I haven't seen that yet this year. I think that's probably going to be coming out pretty soon. But
Yeah, that'll
it's
be a
always
must watch.
it's always interesting, because I'm like, wow, trust companies are the most trusted, and then you see what the companies are doing, and it's a little bit of a, yeah, I guess, I don't know.
It's an opportunity, Michelle. I mean, I'm glad you brought that up, because it's a huge opportunity. If you see other companies, and it's right, it's okay to be skeptical. Your audiences are going to be skeptical, but that just provides an opportunity, right? If you're doing things the right way, if you're holding true to your values and your purpose, then you're doing right by your people. And again, going back to people, they'll trust you for that, and they'll stick around.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, by the same token, if you lose their trust, it's much harder to win them back. Not to say that it can't be done, but I think it takes a lot to build that trust, and then you have to maintain that trust with your actions and your words, and they have to kind of match up. So, yes. So obviously, if people have questions, please post those while we're chatting, and we'll try to answer those, either as we go or at the end. So what about let's talk about, the use of tech and AI as part of sustainability efforts for companies. Let's chat about that a little bit.
Yeah, sure, sure. So, all the rage right now is using AI to tackle efficiencies and repetitive tasks that you have as individuals, and even as uh, on the enterprise level. So what you have to be careful in when you're looking and tying that back to your environmental or sustainability or social or governance policies, whatever you have, whatever that looks like for you, you really need to be cautious of the tools you're using, and what the cost is, what the environmental cost, the carbon footprint, the energy scales, of operating these large data systems, especially with AI, right? It takes a lot of power and energy to fuel these tools. So making sure that you take that into effect, because you don't want to be blindsided if something were to happen, right? Some things are out of your control. If you partner or you're too close to a vendor, for example, that leaks your data, we talk about privacy concerns. You need to be able to shore that up and anticipate those on the front end. So, understanding the environmental impact, social impact, are they following government regulations? Are they following policy? What are your vendors doing? Because it's not just, not everybody's going to create their own AI tools. That's tough.
Mhm.
There's a lot out there to choose from. Are those companies doing the right things? So it's just like any other vendor. If you're in the manufacturing space, and you think about your supply chain, you don't want to source conflict minerals, right? That you may have a policy against that.
Mhm. Mhm.
This is the very same thing. You want to make sure, and if you're partnering with any company that touches your data, whether that's an intranet, um, an employee database of like Workday, or whatever you have,
Mhm.
you've already got something, like that it's important. So you want to make sure that any new tools that might be coming out are not just used properly within your organization, but used
Mhm.
properly and follow your values and fit regulatory compliance externally, just like most other things that you would use and vet with a vendor.
What are some you brought up a good point about, vetting the vendors. How do you evaluate AI vendors? Like, what are s I mean, is there a list of criteria somewhere, or, like,
Well,
what would you say?
yeah, and that's a great question. I mean, most of it revolves around privacy, data privacy, um, and what's even tougher is everything is moving so fast, especially in the AI space. Everything is moving so fast. Regulation kind of lags behind. So again, it goes back to serving your people and your stakeholders. You do right by them. If something doesn't feel right, if you don't feel like their data is protected enough,
Mhm.
raise your hand and speak up. Put guidelines and create your own policies before regulations come. And I think that's one thing when you look into the future, especially the near future, with so many unknowns and new administrations and things in the United States. Um, you can't anticipate every change, but what you can do is just shore up your footing, right? Make sure you have an AI policy in place. Make sure that you have guidelines for employee use, because if you don't, you're putting yourself and your business at risk. So make sure you have those in place, but also keep an eye on any new regulations that come out, even outside the United States. I know a lot of the EU policies eventually make their way into the United States. You think of GDPR, um, and data privacy, those regulations
Mhm.
that stem from there. If anyone in the US did business in Europe or had an audience in Europe, you probably needed to follow those guidelines. And that's why, we have all of those bars on our websites that make you opt into tracking cookies. You're going to
Yeah.
see the same thing. So with artificial intelligence, there are government resources. The AI Bill of Rights is out there. There's more resources than I can think of off the top of my head, but
Mhm.
regulations are coming. But that's one thing that I've kind of looked to is the EU, and what
Mhm.
might be coming down the pipe to the US, because it will eventually impact us here, if not directly, then at least indirectly. But it's a good guideline to follow.
EU, they do tend to lead the way. I mean, we see that, and I don't know that everything that they're doing will be adopted in the United States, but I mean, I guess we'll see how that works out. So,
Yeah,
I
but
go
even if it's not adopted, right? I think it's a
ahead.
good proactive step. We're always wondering how we can be more proactive as communicators,
Yep.
and be less reactive. This is one way to do that. Not waiting around for the US to implement a regulation, but looking to the EU for something to implement with your own organization. and saying, I like that. That's going to protect us. And you can do it in a way that fits your organization's needs and structure. And you don't have to, for example, if a regulation does come down the pipe, you don't have to do so much work and so much change when that happens.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
Just looking at how, other, how we've, regulated technology in general here in the States, I guess I am skeptical about regulations, but that doesn't mean it's not a good idea, to your point. So
Yeah.
I agree with you, but we'll see. I wanna back up for 1 minute and whenever you talk about AI and sustainability, people tend not to want to talk about it, right? I mean, I find that companies shy away from that topic, and
Mhm.
people, individuals even can get a little, defensive about it, I guess. So I I guess, is anybody even thinking about, like, are most people even aware or thinking about how much energy it takes when you use AI technology? Is that on
Uh,
anyone's radar?
right now, it might not be. Right now, it might not be. But there are tech companies that are looking into new energy sources, and there may be some news later this year where um, you'll see some major brands, familiar brands that have lobbied to get their own power stations, for example, right?
Mhm,
Um, so that is coming. That is coming, and I do believe that it will be something of a conversation. Uh, I don't know how near in the future that's going to be, but
mhm,
if you're not thinking about that right now, it might be good to kind of put a pin in that
mhm,
and revisit it, because it is going to be a topic of conversation.
mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think it needs to happen, but I just, again, I see whenever anytime that gets brought up, I see people like, we don't wanna touch that. We don't wanna talk about that." So, I mean, and that's, as communicators, another part of our role is to kind of get our organizations ready to talk about all kinds of, sticky issues, and have, have a FAQ on file, or at least have some kind of idea of how you might address those questions, especially if you're a bigger corporation,
Mhm.
you haven't really come forward with any statement or thoughts or position, on sustainability and, AI. So interesting. Um, so let's talk. Should we talk? I know. I mean, I know we're going to talk about DEI, and of course, it's in the news a lot right now. Um, what do you think is important, to share on that front?
Yeah, so I have a lot of thoughts and opinions on this. I will say that there's a lot of things that are always going to be important, and again, it ties back to your people, whether they're in or outside your company. Your people are always going to matter, no matter how you label it. Um, you could call it belonging, you could call it diversity of perspective or thought, um, but these things are always going to matter, and how you present yourself internally will filter out externally as well. So your reputation relies on how you treat your own people, your staff and employees. So again, it's going back to that thing about the political wind shifting, and you see it both ways. It happens. It's a fact of life. But if you take care of your people, and you have empathy and humility and all those things, you hear about good leaders having all those good leadership qualities. Um, do people want to work for you? Do people want to um, buy your product? Do people want to do business with you? They'll
Mhm,
trust you if they think that you'll treat them well, right? And it goes beyond the bottom line. Um, there's lots of competition out there that can
mhm,
do the same things that you do. But if
mhm,
someone feels better about you and can connect with you on a personal level,
yeah.
And if that means keeping those policies in place and,
Mm.
political repercussions be damned, then you need to do that. And so, uh, again, the communities that you serve, what is important to them? And you really need to focus on that because that is a market differentiator for you.
And I think, we have seen that your customers also are paying attention to how you treat your employees. So I do think that this is important, and I know that some might dismiss it as, not impacting the bottom line, but I absolutely think it can impact the bottom line. And again, people are watching more than ever, to see how brands are reacting and behaving, and amidst all of the chaos right now, around this issue. And I feel like we saw companies kind of taking strides forward, and now we might be. I don't know where we're at with it, but I feel like they implemented the policies, the DEI policies, and now they're some of them are getting rid of them. Although you and I did chat about, how some companies like Apple, I believe, was one of the ones that we talked about,
Mm-hmm.
they are not backing away from their DEI policies.
Yeah, Costco is another big one that's on people's minds. Costco, Apple, a handful of the airlines, I believe,
Mm,
Delta, United, Southwest. But what Apple did was they urged their shareholders not to vote against the policies.
mhm,
Not gonna talk too much about the specifics there because I don't know, but
mhm,
their reason for that, their reason for taking that stance, um, toward keeping those efforts was that they felt that they had taken the right steps and, protected themselves from a compliance standpoint, a policy standpoint, that everything is shored up, from a legal front. Um, so that helps, kind of calm any fears uh, or increase temperatures on the subject, right? Because if you already had good policies in place that you know were there to kind of foster inclusivity, however you want to define that, but inclusiveness, um, not silencing anybody, hiring the right people, not based on any criteria, or not hiring people based on certain criteria, right? It's just
mhm,
that was their standpoint, I believe.
mhm. Yeah, I think it's been interesting to watch, you know, obviously, we've seen Meta in the news a lot, regarding this issue, and then and Apple, or those are the 2 that. And I have seen a lot about Costco too, and I'm glad that you've listed some other ones, because we can see that, um, not it's just gonna it's a divisive issue, which really maybe shouldn't be a divisive issue, but,
Yeah,
again.
and I think it also points to the fact that if you go back to several years ago when people started hiring DEI roles and chief diversity officers and this and that,
Yes.
a lot of it was window dressing. We think about greenwashing in the sustainability world, but it was sort of the same thing. It was fluff. It was, I don't want to say meaningless, but it was an act, right? And now people can see through those things.
Mhm,
And if you're backtracking, maybe you weren't serious about your values to begin with. And again, back to what you said earlier, Michelle, it's about the consistency and staying true to your core purpose and your people. So, you know, stay the line.
I see a theme, I'm sensing a theme.
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
And again, and I have to say that, I think we saw companies kind of giving more, paying more attention to employees' mental health and their needs, a few years back, and now we see. I feel like, it's kind of shifting again, and the job market is tighter, and so it's hard to make sense of it all, and
Yeah. Well, you mentioned it, and so another phrase that you could call. You talked about mental health, but another phrase that I've seen people toss around to kind of rebrand DEI efforts and things is employee well-being, right? You think about that internally though, but that's well-being, right? Well-being of employees.
Hmm.
I believe what you're going to see is, while it may seem like these things are taking a back seat, the companies that still focus on the well-being of their people
Hmm.
are going to be higher performers. They're going to outperform those who don't take that into consideration, because if you're focusing on your people won't get as burned out easily. They'll be more productive. They'll be happier at work. Again, thinking of just employees. And when that happens, your your company productivity goes up, energy stays higher. That translates outside of the company. Customers will see that.
Hmm.
External stakeholders will see that. Shareholders will see that if it's a public company.
Hmm.
People will take note. Um, and it's going to matter. So
Hmm.
that's that again. That part won't go away, but you'll be able to see the cream sort of rise to the top. The people who do
I,
care
ho-
about these things.
I hope so. I hope that's true.
Me too. Me too.
Because I always,
If it is true, I want to work for those companies and do business and be partners with those companies. But
yeah, I mean, I think it is true, but sometimes I think it's a hard sell. It's like, doing the right thing, doing what's right is not always they don't always see it as be impacting the bottom line in a positive way, but I do believe that that is the way it works, and I'm hoping that companies will see the importance, whether or not they window dress and slap a DEI label on it, or have however they address it. I mean, if they actually are doing it,
mhm.
whatever they call it or not call it, I do think that people are paying attention, and that it does matter, and I hope that you know that companies understand that. So
And I've got a statistic for you that a recent just a couple years ago. So it's not that recent. It was a few years ago.
mhm,
But PwC did a study where they found that 86% of employees
mhm,
prefer to work at companies that share the same values that they do. And I would imagine that also extends outside the company too, to customers, right? If they want to buy or do business, or even if you're B2B, right? If you're B2B and you're looking for a partnership, you want to share some values,
yeah,
right? Um, so if you change your values all the time, right, it's hard to keep business steady. I guess is the message there.
yeah. And again, like I just feel like customers are just paying more attention to this than they really ever have, and it doesn't, with the competition, it doesn't take a lot for someone to switch gears and go with a competitor that might be, viewed more favorably on some of these things than a company that isn't. So, I mean, I don't think it's something to be discounted.
No, I was having a conversation with somebody. I recently joined the PRSA Tampa chapter board, and we had one of our meetings last week. And somebody there on the board actually said, because this topic came up, she switched her Sam's Club membership to Costco because of their stance. So that's one of many, but it is happening. It is happening.
I heard some of that too. I saw that somewhere. Somebody was posting about that. So, I again, there is something to it. I guess, trends over time will tell the tale, but I do think that it's something you can't overlook, and kind of tying it. I mean, obviously, we're tying it all to PR and comms, and
Mhm.
I do think that having these policies in place helps attract talent, and if it is, difficult, competitive to find, good people to come and join your company, I think that these things help you stand out. And if word is on the street and the buzz is out there, then it's positive in so many ways. I don't think people always think big picture about how all of this works together and impacts everything else. And so it's important to not ignore it, I think, and remember that it is part of your image, and your reputation is everything. So
Mhm. Absolutely. Especially when we're playing the long game, as we are in PR and comms. So,
big picture, long game. Yes,
mhm.
absolutely. And again, we hope clients and companies understand, it isn't about just your announcement next week. It's
Oh,
really it's a much bigger um, picture than that. So yes. Um, what else would you like to talk about? I don't know if we've really talked about governance enough, or what other points would you think are important to make?
yeah. I think we could elaborate on some governance and AI policies specifically, because when we talk about employee people well-being of people, right, we're also talking about making sure that we connect with them and have the best interest in mind. And when we're thinking about how we're using artificial intelligence and how our organizations might be using artificial intelligence, whatever the purpose, whatever the tool, whether you're using it, ChatGPT to help you plan, or um, uh, a more robust tool that's built into something you're already using, right, for media monitoring, for example, you've got to understand where the data is coming from, because obviously there's biases, right? And you you've got to fact check and do all the things that, like, we're taught to do, when we're editing, um,
Mhm,
making sure that the data is correct, but knowing more about the tools and where it's sourcing the data, um,
mhm,
the the ethical implications of this, the biases that technology um, is just, it's embedded into these tools.
mhm,
And knowing how a large language model works, for example, which is what LLM stands for, and
mhm,
that's a lot of how a chat GPT or a Claude, that's a lot of how these are built off of large language models. And they're prone to social identity biases, unfortunately. So
mhm,
if we're aware of those, we can learn as professionals to kind of train the models that you're using,
mhm,
um, and not just use it, you know, too broad, too generally, if that makes
mhm,
sense.
mhm,
So you got to know where those pitfalls are, and I think that's really important when it comes to implementing policies and applying some sort of AI policy, whether it's you're incorporating ESG into the AI policy, or you're implementing some kind of AI policy mentioned into your ESG policies, whatever that looks like. Um, it's important to intertwine those two.
yes. And how are companies handling that? Are they I mean, are some companies, I'm sure they are having to bring in another, uh, person in the C-suite to kind of be the AI, point person?
Yeah, I've seen this in some of the large PR firms
Mhm,
around the country. They've hired chief AI officers or something to that effect, or some high level um, AI. I'm going to call it a czar, but someone to oversee the implementation, and especially for clients too, because there's things are happening so fast and it is hard to keep up. And it's important, but you don't know how to use it or what to do, or
yeah,
um, uh, what to even have in a policy. That's where those types of people come in. And if you're working, in house, and maybe that's somebody in the IT department, or a CTO or a CIO,
mhm,
or chief innovation officer, or even strategy, there's going to have to be somebody who takes this on if they haven't done it already. And I urge you to kind of champion that if you're in a place that doesn't have that right now.
mhm,
Um, we don't have a crystal ball, but if you have somebody at that level dedicated to helping the organization figure it out for your stakeholders, for your customers, your clients, whatever that looks like, yeah, it's an imperative. So I have been seeing that, and I'm sure it's, you know, the private sector, the corporations and agencies alike that are looking to do that.
And when you've mentioned a few times about having a policy. Do you think it's important for companies to communicate their stance on AI and, you know, as comms and PR pros, I mean, how should we be presenting that to our audiences? Or should we be, or how would you view that?
Yeah, I really think it depends on your organization and what you do. Um, Obviously, if you're dealing with a lot of customer information or sensitive data, um, you should be talking about that. Like, you should probably already have an AI policy, to be honest with you, and I'm sure you do. But the way that you talk about that and how often you put that out there, you know, it's really up to the type of organization. Um, I've seen people, you know, add this to the footer of their website, just like data privacy policies. You know, how do we
Mhm.
use your information? And I think that's probably where that goes in. Um, if you are uh, an organization that produces a significant amount of content, um, I think you should probably also um, have some disclosures. Now, you probably don't need to communicate it as much to your stakeholders, but you know how you package the material. If you're using AI to connect the dots, to connect your systems, to connect databases with whatever content output or publishing software or site that you're using, it's good to kind of have that as a mention. But um, that's a hard one to answer. It really is, because I think people do need to know that you've not that you have an AI policy per se, but that you know what you're doing, right? They want to feel confident that you feel confident in how you're handling artificial intelligence going forward. The what of that, I think, is probably too deep for most customers, for example.
Right.
But I think they just want to be assured that you feel confident that you know what you're doing.
It seems like another instance where legal and PR and need to be working together on, making sure that, you know, nothing is said that isn't, you know, true and, you know, putting forward only the information that, only the things that they really need to know, to your point, not going too far
Mhm.
into it, but at least having the policy and then determining whether or not you wanna share that or need to share that with your customers, and of course, it would vary on your industry and whether you're public or private and all those things, so, of course, there's no blanket here, but I'm just curious, like, if people are I'm curious to see now if I'm just probably gonna be noticing whether companies are talking about this, communicating their policies,
Yeah, yeah, and I don't mean to frighten anybody, but when you think about the AI vendors that you're using, and you want to go with people that you trust,
mhm,
it is early, but there are still some, I would say, largely trusted vendors. Let's say Microsoft, for example, that have had issues with Copilot, inadvertently sharing sensitive data outside of the company. It's been uh,
mm,
uh, you know, there are going to be those challenges, right? They shored that up, but there are going to be challenges, and um, you know, you've got to really vet. And you mentioned the connection there between legal. You really have to have strong connections with info security too. And I know you're probably going to have that anyway, but to check, double check, triple check, evaluate, making sure that what you're using, if it's internal only, is truly internal and there's no gaps. Uh, if there is a concern, just don't use that tool, and don't use it for those reasons, which is why AI policies are good, because it gives employees a guideline for how to and how not to use certain things. Not to discourage them from using a tool, But let's
Mhm.
just say that you have the opportunity, an employee has company or customer sensitive information. They shouldn't be uploading that to a ChatGPT tool if it's not secure.
Yeah.
It sounds like common sense,
Mhm.
but but you have to have it in writing, and you have to have your butt covered.
Yes.
So
Yeah, I mean, I have to sign NDAs all the time, and that was always my concern from the get-go, with things like ChatGPT. I can't be, like, putting a bunch of confidential client data into a tool and saying, "Okay, write the press release," or whatever, like, I can't do that. I mean, that's I mean, to me, that, I could get in trouble, and it's just ethically not, what I'm about, but I just wonder, again, this whole thing, and it's been what now, 2.5, 2 years since it kinda got out of the gate with no guardrails, and so
mhm,
now, I don't know, like, I don't know how you back up, there, but I do think companies are smart to be thinking how it impacts them, not only from a ethical and just how they are viewed from a reputation perspective, but legally too. There could be implications. So, yeah, I do think it's still something to be I'm sure they are thinking about it in that way, because that could impact their bottom line if they, get a major lawsuit or something, but,
mhm.
I don't know. It's just I think it's still I feel like there's probably a lot of things going on that people wouldn't even understand are gonna be issues until they are issues. It's hard to have that, um that vision into,
Yeah.
the future and how it's gonna really play out.
It helps to start small before you go take anything to enterprise. But if any of you happen to be, if any of your listeners happen to be, champions of initiatives like this, within their own organizations, it's always just like everything else. It's always a smart thing to start small, and it doesn't have to be too small. There's no such thing as too small, right? Just if you're experimenting, if you're dabbling, that's great. Just make sure that even if it's just you or your team, if you have a team of 2 or 3, you should still have something in place. You need your own policy, your own guideline, just for you or you 2 or you 3. Um,
Mhm.
uh, and you could use that as a model if you want to grow that to your organization. But even for your individual use, you've got to have something that covers your backside.
Yeah, because I think people just have fun and it's like shiny object, "Oh, we're just gonna go all in on this thing," and there was no, like, thought really given to, what the ramifications were gonna be, so, you definitely wanna be looking ahead as much as you can and kind of trying to understand, what that could look like or what issues could crop up. Well, is there anything else that we should be covering before we wrap this up today?
I would leave everybody with some words of encouragement to, I don't know, I'm thinking about professional development and how, as individuals and as professionals, um, we can help ourselves in this realm, ESG and AI, the things that we've talked about today. Don't wait on anybody. Um, I would I would learn on your own as much as you can, and when the time comes, you can raise your hand, or if your name's called, or just lead from wherever you are. You don't have to be a manager of people. You could lead from the middle, lead from the bottom, wherever you are. Find something that's important to you, and your own purpose and mission, and hopefully that fits with your organization's mission. We so many times in our PR and comms profession, we straddle that line, and sometimes there's conflict between what we do and how we feel and the people we work for, and our clients. But you'll find that for yourself, and don't wait for somebody to tell you to learn something. Go ahead and learn something new. Yeah, learn something new. There's going to be a lot of changes this year. Just jump in, and yeah, don't be afraid.
You have to start somewhere. That's what I always think, and, I think it's fun. I mean, I think it's fun to learn. It's not always fun that you have to know all these things, but it
Yeah.
is fun to learn new things and keep trying to challenge yourself and push yourself to, really grow and in your knowledge of things that impact, your role at your company and your company and its place in the world. And so I really want to thank you so much for being here today. And please be sure to follow Bo. I put his LinkedIn in the comments. And he has an email course and he also has an upcoming workshop. Do you want to talk? Why don't you just talk for a second about those? Can you want to talk about those?
Yeah, so the email course, it's a free 7-day email course. You just sign up and you get an email a day, basically, that kind of goes through. It's a Gen AI playbook for executive messaging and employee engagement, and so it tells you everything you need to know from what tools could be out there, how you should be using it to improve some of the work that you do, and a lot of the things I talked about today are in there. There is regulatory content, there's compliance content, there is strategies, what you can do. So it kind of takes you from you know beginner level content all the way to building out your a strategy or roadmap for AI implementation within your team or organization. And so that's the email course. And the workshop right now, it's in person, and I'm developing a virtual option right now too. But the workshop is, again, putting my teaching hat on here as a adjunct instructor at the university level. I'm thinking about preparing my students for work in PR and comms, and I realize that there's a gap with AI literacy and AI fluency among us as professionals. And so that's what that workshop is for. It's Gen AI readiness for communicators, and that's based in Tampa. So if any of you are in Tampa, I'd
Mm.
encourage you to attend. I'd be happy to see you. I've got you buy a ticket, you get to invite someone for free. So Valentine's Day is coming up. It'd be a great way to buddy up with a coworker or a colleague. So come see me.
Yeah. I wish I were down there so I could come. I would love to be there. This is a topic that's fascinating, and I just think there's so many aspects that are going to be relevant for communicators. And so, again, I want to thank you so much for being here today, Bo. And I want to thank everybody for watching and listening. And we'll be back February 5th. We'll be talking about PR for startups. And I hope to see everybody then. Thank you so much.